How you going? My name's Terrence and welcome back to Rusted Iron Ranch. Today's video, I'm going to do a video on how I prep a chainsaw, how I go through, clean, and sharpen all the rest of it. I did a job the other day, a tree job for someone, so the Husky 385 is a little bit down, so we're going to go through, pull it apart, clean it. I might even grease the bearing on the clutch as well, and we'll just sharpen it up, ready for use next time. I'll just mention that I got the idea for this video from our friend named Nicole, so thank you, Nicole. Alright, here we go. Okay, so I'll just preface this with, this isn't a how-to or really a tutorial or anything like that. I'm really just showing you how I go ahead and do my saw maintenance and sharpening. So, with that, like I said before, this is a Husqvarna 385, roughly 85cc, I think they're more like 83. I've had this for a couple of years now. I've used it for just general firewood cutting, tree falling, and I have used it also on my chainsaw mill with a 36-inch bar, slabbing pine. So, it's done the job, and it's been a pretty good saw. With that, I will start tearing into it. Okay, here we go. So the first thing we'll do is take our side cover off. Take the bar off and chain as well. Okay, so this is pretty much as far as I'll tear down just for normal daily maintenance. I will go one step further today though, but you obviously don't need to do that all the time. I just do it incrementally to make sure that I know that the bearing is greased up. So with that, I'm going to take these outside. I'll start the compressor up and I'll clean off the side cover, clean off the power head, and I'll clean out the bar. Saying that, with the bar, I'll just remember I do like to flip my bars over incrementally. So this was this way up, so the lettering was the right way up, so I'll remember to flip it over the other way and run it upside down next time, just to even out that wear. A little bit hard to explain, but yeah, the chain accelerating along here, it's actually worse after the tip. It probably will, once you do get a little bit of a wear spot here, it will run in and wear that out as well, but it's worse on the bottom side, whereas the chain's obviously accelerating really quickly and weighs something, so it's turning a corner and it keeps trying to turn that corner and it'll wear out just in under here. So I can see it was that way and there was a little bit of wear there. I think I must have dressed this bar last time, so it's actually pretty good, so I probably won't need to do that. I've probably only done a couple of tanks since anyway. So I don't need to do that today, but I will flip it over. So with that, we'll take all this stuff outside. I'll run the air compressor down the bar as well, clean all that out, and we'll get it all cleaned up. Okay, so when you're using the air compressor on this, make sure you got eye protection on. There's nothing worse than it blowing back, getting you in the face, getting something in your eye. So it's really easy to do. Alright, well, I'm just going to clean off the power head. I'll clean off the side cover. I might even start with the bar. Always blow away. It's not that important with a hard tip bar, like a hard nose, so no roller at the front, no sprocket. But I always blow away from the tip. This one, like I said, it doesn't really matter because there's no sprocket to get gunked up, and the real problem is if you blow towards the tip, you'll build up in behind the sprocket and it can pull in behind the sprocket in there, and you can get your sprocket stuck. It's not the end of the world. You can always free it up anyway, but always do it away. Okay, so here we go. Just a point to note, on the Huskies, the bar adjustment is in the side cover, or on this particular Husky it is. So always make sure I clean that out pretty thoroughly because they do get gunked up a fair bit. Just another point to note, I always make sure that I have the chain brake off so your clutch can move freely, and then you can really get around that chain brake and blow out anything that gets stuck around there. And then there's also less, in this instance, when I'm going to be taking the clutch off, there's less stuff left around the area that can then drop in, then you've got to clean out later. Okay, that's looking pretty good now. It's pretty clean. Now just before we go back inside, take the top cover off. I'll clean around it first, around the air cleaner, and then I'll take the air cleaner off. Now the rest of the saw is pretty clean, and I'll clean that out, making sure to blow from the inside out, and then you can blow all those particles that are stuck to it back off the air cleaner. I do like to pull the choke on just before, because then that flap is closed over in your carby, and then if anything big does drop in, you kind of stop it before it goes any further, and you can leave that choke on and just blow in the inlet of the carby, and it should blow anything back out. I'm just going to take this away and blow it, but just so I don't get anything back on the clean saw now and in the carby. But like I said, making sure to blow from the inside out to free up anything that's on the outside. No real particles should get in the inside, because the filter's doing its job. So that's why we blow from the inside out. Okay, that's looking pretty clean. Now, like I said, do try to blow from the inside out, or I do try to. Although that's not always the case, and you're not always going to get everything off the filter. So I do blow kind of across the filter as well, and sometimes you do need to tap it out to get whatever's stuck in those folds to actually break loose. So that filter's pretty clean now. It was not that bad anyway, and like I said, this saw's probably only done a couple of tanks since I last went through it. Alright, so we're looking all pretty good, everything's pretty clean. We'll take it all back inside, we'll give it a bit of a wipe down, and then we'll start reassembling and sharpen. Okay, so we're back inside now. Just before we go ahead and put it back together, I'm just going to take the clutch off, take the sprocket and clutch off, and we will just put a bit of grease on the roller bearing on the inside there. And all the while we're just inspecting just to see if anything's wearing out. I don't suspect anything will be. So I just use the normal chainsaw tool. You can just get it in and watch out. I like to call these outer space clips, because if you're not careful, that's where it'll launch itself. There we go, got it off. There's two little, I just kind of get the corner in there and get them on. Get that to the side. Our washer, a sprocket that we just dropped. Looks brand new still. It's looking pretty good. And the clutch. Now your clutch will get not only sawdust, but you'll also get clutch like the dust and that in here too. So it is good to clean these out every so often. So there's a little bit in there, as you can see. Probably at least 75% of that's actually just dust, but we'll clean that up before we reassemble. And here's our roller bearing. Looks pretty good. Oh, that looks alright. I might just give that a spray out with some lube, and then I'll pop a little bit of grease back on it, and then we'll slip it back on. Beforehand, I might actually take this back outside just real quickly, and I'll just blow out the actual clutch itself, just because there's a little bit more clutch matter probably, and sawdust sitting in behind the clutch. So I'll just quickly do that, and then I'll bring you back. Okay, so I've blown off the clutch, I've cleaned out the actual clutch drum, and I've got way too much grease here. I wouldn't suspect you need to use any high pressure grease. I do like to use something that has a bit of temperature resistance, but I don't think you could really go wrong. Whatever grease you got will work. And I'll just try to pack a little bit of this into the roller bearing and then wipe off the excess. I think this grease is like a wheel bearing grease. Like, this is pretty messy and there's a lot going on here, but you'll see there doesn't end up being a lot on there when you're done. Wipe off all the excess, because otherwise it's all going to end up in your clutch anyway. So just working that through. Okay, we probably call that. Drop our clutch back on. And a point to note, if you're having trouble getting your clutch off, make sure your chain brake's off, because the chain brake band is that silver bit in there. I don't know if you can see it. When I put the chain brake on, what it does, it actually closes that band around the clutch, if the clutch is installed. Right now it's not, so the crankshaft can still spin freely. But if I take that off, you can actually see when I'm taking it off, it gets bigger. So if your clutch isn't coming off, just double check that. There we are. Bit of pressure and rotate. Remember to put your sprocket back on. I run 3/8 on this saw. Washer. And the clip. So you can just push from behind. Make sure your fingers are out of the way. Like that. Another way to do it is you just get a bit of, so it's a bit hard taking it off like this. I might just redo it just to show. It's probably the better way to do it. Watch me lose this clip as I try to take it off unnecessarily. Okay, so let's do that again. So last time I just kind of hit it on, but you can be setting yourself up to launch that into outer space. So another way to do it, pointy nose pliers. Most saws will have that hole in the end of the crankshaft, and then you can just get the other nose of the plier on the outside of the clip. Just make sure your fingers on it too and out the way. And just slowly close the pliers up and push it on that way. That's probably the safer, better way. But if you don't have a set of pointy nose pliers handy, you can always do it the other way. Okay, we're looking to reassemble now. Remembering I was going to put my my bar upside down. So I'll reinstall the chain and the bar. I did say before, so the Husky's, the chain tensioners on the side cover, whereas a similar size still, a lot of them are actually on the saw. When it's on the saw, this is the time when I find it actually really useful, because you can actually slide it onto the pin and start getting a bit of tension before you even put the side cover on. Whereas with the Huskies, you've got to kind of make sure everything's sitting on before you start putting the side cover on. And on uneven ground, you're trying to do this on the ground, your chain's just fallen off or something like that, you're doing it out in the bush or wherever you're working, it can be a little bit of a pain. On a bench, it's absolutely fine. That's probably where the stills are a little bit better in that situation. So, with that, put the side cover back on. So our pins in the right spot at least. So we'll do these nuts up a little bit more. Not all the way up, still haven't done our chain tension yet. Always make sure you lift the bar up, because see, it's like a static sag type setup just there, so make sure it's sitting up. That's where it's supposed to be sitting. Otherwise, if you do it down, as soon as you hit a log and it even kicks back in the slightest, it'll loosen the chain. I don't go all the way on the tension just on the adjustment, because when you do tighten your bar nuts up, you do get a tiny little bit more, but a bit of trial and error. Once one nut's done up, you pretty much can let go of it. Watch your fingers here sliding off and getting the dogs. So that's probably too tight a little bit. A little bit too tight. It will loosen as it heats up, so a little bit tight when it's cold isn't the worst thing. That's better. Okay, Now I'll get it set up in the vise and we'll go through how I sharpen. Okay, so with 3/8 chain, you usually use a 13/64 file, which would be this one here, and I do use that quite often. Although sometimes I like to sharpen a slightly different way, and that's using a 7/32, which is 1/64 bigger than this one, and 7/32 is usually suited to your 404 chain, so that's the standard file for that. The reason I like to do this, and it goes in combination with another thing I like to do, is I like to stand the tooth up straighter a little bit more. Obviously, when the file gets a little bit bigger, the radius and therefore the diameter gets a little bit bigger of the circle that you're trying to cut into the tooth. And along with doing that, I also take my rakers down a little bit lower. And with that, I've found it stays sharper for longer. It is a fairly aggressive sharpen, especially for your first half a tank or so. But I've found that the effort required to try to muscle or saw through a log, and the time that it stays sharp, and because I've got it so much more aggressively sharp in the first place, it outweighs that as far as I'm concerned. So that's just one way I sharpen. I'm not saying you have to do this. It's just something I've been experimenting with for quite a while, and it's worked pretty well. So I've been doing this for probably a couple of years now, through, I don't know how many tanks. Probably done with it this way, and been really happy with it. So another thing before I start sharpening, just a point to note, a lot of people that I see when they're sharpening push down, and all that achieves, well, it's not all that achieves, you will still be actually sharpening the tooth up in the top, but you won't be sharpening it probably the best you could be sharpening it. So what will happen if you just push down is you're just removing material on the bottom of the tooth, which if you go too far, it starts actually scoring into your drive links, and there's really no point in removing material down there. So if I'm ever just giving pointers to new guys that are starting with saws or anything like that, I always try to say keep the file up into the tooth on an angle, back into it. So kind of pull back into the tooth and keep it up. You're not lifting as such, but you're keeping it back up into the tooth. So if you could point the direction that I'm kind of forcing the file when I'm doing this, it's kind of like that way. So I might actually, I've got a new whiteboard. I might just take you over there and we will just draw on there what I'm trying to explain. Okay, so here's our tooth. I hope you can see that there. And here's our pretend file, just a bit of pipe. What I see a lot is people, so obviously that fits in there in the tooth, but if you get a downward pressure, you're actually just filing straight down like this. The part we need to be sharp is this top bit up in here. So like I said, there's actually no point in sharpening straight down. So the direction that we're trying to look for is kind of like that. That's the direction of pressure that I'm trying to maintain to make sure that I sharpen right up into the top of the tooth. And then we've got a nice sharp bit up here, and then what I'm trying to do now is also I just stand the tooth up a little bit more, just with that bigger circle. It's slight, we're talking not very much at all, just something, like I said, that I've been experimenting with. And the other thing that I do also is take my raker down. So you always take your rakers down anyway, and there's actually a couple of really good multi-tool kind of sharpening tools out there now that'll take your rakers down to the right level while you're sharpening your tooth. And the way they do that is kind of bridge in between a couple of teeth, and they've got a flat file in the center, so they'll take out your actual tooth as well, the gullet I guess we'll call it, and they'll take down your raker to the right height. And the idea of the raker, if you don't know, is when your bit of wood, it's just a bit of wood I can lay my hands on, comes through, the raker adjusts how much, or allows a certain amount of wood to actually come in contact with that tooth. So if that raker was taller, it'd have to be up here somewhere, and only that much of the wood would be able to come in contact with the tooth. You take the rakers down, more wood can come in contact with the tooth. So that's the idea behind the raker as well. Like I said, this is only just how I do it. I'm in no way an expert on this, but that's the rationale of what I'm trying to do here. Okay, back at the saw. I hope the whiteboard helped me make a little bit of sense there, give you a bit of rationale of my thinking behind this. So we'll just go through and do exactly what I was saying, just that, maintain that force, cut on the forward stroke and just bring it back. I'm not really filing on the back stroke. And what I'm looking for is when I can see the top of the tooth form straight again. So when they get really blunt, they'll round the edges too, but you might even get like little divots coming out of it. If you hit something like a rock, you'll definitely get divots coming through. And it's really easy for me to see. I'm looking straight down on it. I can see a straight line. Once I've filed back enough, I can see a straight line with the file. So I know that's probably enough. And that was, I don't know how many swipes that was, about 3 or 4. So we'll look at about 3 or 4 swipes to get us to sharpen. There might be a couple more that need a couple more swipes, but we should be pretty consistent because all these teeth have done the same thing. They've all hit a similar bit of wood. They all probably hit the similar rock if that was the case. So they should only take what the next one took really. So we'll go through and I'll get this side sharpened up. Okay, so our teeth are all done this side. While we've got it in the bias this side, I'll go down and do the rakers. Similar premise to the teeth, we'll look at doing similar amount of swipes on each raker. Once again, because the teeth have all seen the same thing, so they should all need about the same. Now, what someone told me, which I've always used to identify whether I need to take the rakers down, is how much of the top of the tooth is clean. So if your rakers are down far enough, that's letting enough wood come through and make contact with that tooth. And therefore, if enough wood is coming in contact with the tooth, it'll actually kind of clean the top of the tooth. If you get to the point where your rakers are too high, it'll kind of just, think of it just like it's spinning its wheels. It's kind of, it's pretty much doing a burnout on your bit of timber. And probably not doing much cutting. It will be doing a little bit, but I guess because of that, it's not allowing a nice big bit of wood to come through and kind of whack the sap and all the rest of it off the top of that tooth. Now, depending on what type of timber you're cutting, this probably isn't always the case, but I've found this to be pretty accurate in identifying whether or not my rakers need to come down. Okay, so something I use to see if I'm consistently taking down my rakers is the size. So if you look down, straight down your raker, they actually they start off really small because they come into like a point nearly. They're not a point, it's flat on top, but it's smaller at the top and it gets bigger as it goes down. So as you take swipes off the top of the raker, if you're looking straight down at it, it'll actually end up getting bigger or longer. So that's a good way to kind of tell if they're equal, because if they're all about the same size, you know that you've taken them down to about the same level because they get longer as you go further down. Okay, so I've gone through and got the other side done. Something to note is you'll probably preference a side. So as long as you're aware that you might be going a little bit heavier one side than the other and you can adjust accordingly, that's all you really need to know. And what I mean there is because right and left-handed, it's actually, for me, I'm right-handed, it's comfier when the power head's on the left-hand side and I can go through and sharpen that side. So I'm always mindful when I'm sharpening this side that I'm still trying to cut the same amount of material off the teeth with the file. So with this, just mention that, so everything I've done here today, like I said, not a tutorial, just how I do it, but if you want to pick up anything, you got to watch people. It's exactly what I've done over the years. So the practices I've done here are exactly the same as if you were using a 13/64 for a 3/8 chain. So there's no real changes there. Same thing, you still take your rakers down as they need it. Like I said, there's some really great sharpening tools out there now that have they actually have 2 round files on them and a flat file in the center. I actually don't have one here, but they're really good, and especially for someone who doesn't do a lot of saw sharpening, I'd really recommend one of those. And that's for more doing your standard sharpen. Like I said, I've done a little bit of a different sharpen here today, but the practices are still exactly the same. And the only reason I do this is just because I've been experimenting over the years and decided to sharpen like this and see how it goes, and it's worked for me for the most part. So another thing I'll just say, I read once, and I always do this after I've sharpened. I'll just put you down here for a second. I read once that files are very rarely ever blunt, and more so just clogged up. So what I always like to do is, so that you always get a lot of filings stuck in your file. So I like to go through, maybe somewhere you can actually see, and every time I use a file, I just like to get a wire brush, and I just use it on the bench, and the file actually goes a certain way. So we're looking at it, the file teeth are all that way. So I just wire brush out the file in the end and just clean it. And I find that the file will say last longer this way because it's clean every time you go to use it, and it'll cut a lot better if it's clean. So with that, there's very little material left still on that file. I do believe there is a chemical way to clean them. I can't remember what that is, but yeah, there's something you can actually kind of sit them in, and it'll break what's left in there done. But the first step is to get most of that matter off with a wire brush. Same thing with the flat file, and the teeth all do go one way as well. Or they do only go one way on this flat file. On a normal file, like I don't have one here in front of me, they would go both ways, but on these files they only go one. So same thing, just clean that out, and it's as easy as that. And I always do that after, and sometimes before, if I can't remember if I've done it or not. So there's a couple of little extra tips just there. So that's how I sharpen my chainsaw. When I go through, and I'll do my little still a little bit later, I think it's pretty sharp, but the next time I have to use it after that, it might be in need of a sharpen. I'll go through, and I'll just do it normally on that saw. It's a 3/8 chain as well, but I just go through with a 13/64. I don't worry about using the larger 7/32 file on that one. The only reason I do it on this saw is just a bit of an experiment, like I said, and I know it's got that little bit extra power that it can use a more aggressive sharpen on wood. And all the wood brand here that we're used to is all hardwood too. So I don't know where you're watching in the rest of the world, but this may or may not work where you are, or you probably have a different way of sharpening there as well. Who knows? So yeah, there you go. So if you like this video, be sure to give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more content, I'm trying to create a video weekly on any of my projects, whether that be the Land Rover, farming here, small time farming we'll call it, here on the ranch, tractor projects, the McDonald engine projects. There's another McDonald there that we'll get onto at some point. I'm going to be probably introducing a couple more motorbikes to the channel soon. You've seen the KV 100, the $100 motorbike that I got running. I'm actually probably going to take that out for a spin in a second, just go out in the paddock and give Sandy a run. But I might be introducing a couple more bikes. I think I do have a couple here that you haven't seen. Not so much projects, but just bikes that I've collected over the years and that are, you know, good to share and good to see. So yeah, so if you want to see more of that, make sure you subscribe. So with that, my name's Terence. This has been Rusted Iron Ranch. Thanks for watching.